Are you ready?
Activate.
Sequence start 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition.
Well, good evening, everyone. I am Jeremiah Greer, and you are listening to Shadows in the Dark. And yes, are you ready? Are you ready for an interesting show tonight? This is going to be a lot of fun. Of course, we're going to be talking about music, which is just one thing that I really, really love, and one of my favorite genre of music, and that is reggae. And of course, this gives me the opportunity to play a lot of Bob Marley tonight. So yes, we are going to have a lot of fun tonight. I'm looking forward to it. And we're going to be welcoming Bret Lueder on here and very shortly, who will be discussing this very, very interesting topic with us. Because we're not really just talking about the music, but what is behind reggae music and what it is that these Rastas are setting out to do. It's very interesting and something I've been interested in for a number of years myself. So that is going to be a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and get into some news, because our breaks are just a little bit longer than usual. Why? Because I threw a little bit of extra Bob Marley in there, of course. So here we go. This is what's going on around the world, whether it's strange, unusual, or just fascinating. Well, the FBI is investigating after governors' offices in West Virginia, Vermont, Wyoming, and Washington State received between 3 and 5 laptops, but no one had ordered any of them. The laptops were made by Hewlett-Packard or come from its Compaq brand. The world's leading PC maker said it told law enforcement that it intercepted and turned around similar deliveries ordered for 6 additional states. Each governor's office reports that the machines arrived in 2 separate shipments, the earliest on August the 3rd, and the paperwork with one shipment indicated that it had been ordered July 22nd. The National Governors Association has issued a bulletin about the suspicious shipments. It seems all were ordered with credit cards, but none that matched any cards in possession of the states. All the laptops received were either shipped back or handed over to law enforcement. Of course, the question is, what exactly was on those laptops? Why were they shipped? Because none of the states reported turning them on, so that is still in question. Well, the U.S. Shuttle Discovery closes in on the space station, which is the International Space Station. It's due today. Today it closed in a little bit closer. I'm going to get that all jumbled up. But anyway, it's on its way to deliver food, a lab freezer, and a treadmill named after TV comedian Stephen Colbert. As the shuttle got closer to the ISS, the astronauts conducted a routine inspection of Discovery's heat shield by maneuvering a sensor on a robotic arm to look for possible damage. The inspections have been taking place in every shuttle mission since the heat shield damage caused Columbia to explode as it returned to Earth in February 2003, killing 7 astronauts. The Discovery crew also checked the spacesuits that will be used for the 3 spacewalks scheduled for the mission aboard the ISS. Discovery and its crew of 7 astronauts, including 1 Swede, is delivering equipment for a new bedroom, the treadmill, of course, a freezer, food, and other supplies. It will also be dropping off the newest member of the ISS team, U.S. astronaut Nicole Stott, who will be taking over from engineer and fellow American Tim Kopra. The shuttle is scheduled to link up with the station at 8:03 p.m. Central Daylight Time. Well, a team of archaeologists, or we like to call them shovel-diggy people, have unearthed a Neolithic cathedral, a massive building of a kind never seen before in Britain, which dates back nearly 5,000 years. The cathedral is 82 feet long and 65 feet wide. What is interesting is that the shape and size of the building are visible, with the walls still standing to a height of more than 3 feet. They are 16 feet thick and surround a cross-shaped inner sanctum where the excavation team have found examples of art and furniture created from stone. It seems that the building was surrounded by a paved outer passage. This could have formed a labyrinth that would have led people through darkness to the chamber at the heart of the building. The building probably served as some kind of temple, maybe for remembering the dead. It may have been a place where sacrifices, even human sacrifices, were offered up. Other buildings over 50 feet long and 30 feet wide have also been discovered in the area. Well, Bill Gates is in the news. Check this out. Bill Gates and a dozen other scientists have raised eyebrows by submitting patent applications for a technology that would reduce the danger of approaching hurricanes by cooling ocean temperatures. Well, skeptics applaud the motive of the concept, but question its feasibility. According to the patents, many tube-like barges would be placed directly in the path of an oncoming storm. Each barge would have 2 conduits, each 500 feet long. One conduit would push the warm water from the ocean surface down. The other would bring up cold water where it lies deep undersea. Well, world-renowned hurricane expert William Gray, who has been studying and predicting the storms for half a century, doubts that this will actually work. Of course, this raises fear that playing with ocean temperatures could lead to could lead to some very bad stuff. Let's put it that way. Impossible, forcing a storm in a different direction. Well, yeah, that is a little bit scary. And of course, we've talked about that in the in past shows, weather manipulation, things like that. Very, very interesting, I have to say. But like I said, that is what's going on in the news right now. Some very interesting stuff, and we have a great, great show tonight. Like I said, we're going to be talking about reggae music. This is a music that I enjoy myself, that I love sitting back and listening to. It's very mellow, so we're going to be playing some of that, of course, throughout the night during our breaks and other things. But before we go to our first break, let me remind everyone, of course, sign up for the forum if you haven't already. It's right there at the top of the page. You can click on the link that says forum, and if you want to take part in our show reminders, you can get a show reminder before each live show, usually about 3 hours ahead of time. Well, just fill out that little show reminder on the right-hand side. Now, it says spell ghost. A lot of people have kind of said, what exactly am I needing to do there? Well, just spell ghost, G-H-O-S-T. Just type that in that little box below it. No question mark, anything like that, and then put in the rest of the information. So if you receive an email confirmation, chances are your email will work with this newsletter program. If you don't, chances are it won't. Not every email works with this, so unfortunately, not everyone can sign up for the show reminders. I wish we could find one. Every newsletter application we have tried just doesn't work. But anyway, let's take a quick little break. Like I said, Bret Lueder will be joining us. We're going to talk about roots reggae music and exactly what is behind it all, and what are these Rastafarians really kind of trying to get through their music to the world out there. So back in a moment, enjoy some Bob Marley.
Visit www.shadowsinthedarkradio.com today to sign up for our free newsletter, join as a member of our forum, or browse our online store where you can find books, CDs, and DVDs, like a signed copy of The President's Vampire by Robert Damon Schneck, or the complete works of Dr. Gary Frick for only $20. That's 4 books signed by Dr. Frick that carry a great message. You will also find downloadable products like Mysteries Magazine and the Donald Kehoe interviews, DVDs featuring Charlie Carlson and Mr. Lobo. So go to www.shadowsinthedarkradio.com today and be a part of the show.
Bret Lueder is the author of the book Song in Your Heart, the story of the search for the lost note, which is about the role of the roots reggae artists as leaders of the human consciousness transformation within this global struggle. Bret, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much for having me, Jeremiah. My honor.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on, and as I was talking before we connected with you, I'm really kind of excited about this because this is we're talking about reggae music here and kind of what's behind it, and this has always been a genre of music that I have just thoroughly enjoyed. Of course, I think for most people that weren't born and raised in Jamaica, it started with me with Bob Marley. Probably the most famous. So tell us, how did you get interested in reggae music and then more into really looking to what this genre of music was all about?
Okay. I'm sure much like yourself, I was born in America here in a white suburb of San Jose, California, and most of the music I was exposed to growing up was rock and roll on the radio. AC/DC, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, that kind of thing, classic rock era music. And then every so often, of course, you'd hear a little bit of a reggae tinge. Eric Clapton came in with I Shot the Sheriff, his version of Bob Marley's hit. Blondie had The Tide is High. The Clash were unafraid to dabble with a little bit of that sound, as well as the Police. So there was always a little bit there, although I didn't really pay too much attention to it. It wasn't until I had a friend take me to a Burning Spear concert, in Oakland, California, in 1988, that I really got a sense that there was more going on than just a party, a type of a rock music concert, how I viewed rock concerts growing up. You know, you get all wasted, you go to the concert, you blow your brains out with whatever drugs or whatever, and then you go home. Well, there's maybe that aspect of it, but as it turns out, it's much, much deeper than that. These artists, especially artists like a Burning Spear who are still around, a guy like Burning Spear or Jimmy Cliff or Toots Hibbert of Toots and the Maytals, these guys are from Bob Marley's time.
Right.
And it was a really crucial era. Essentially, most people know Bob Marley. So that's really a good example to use. What I found, what he's doing, it's a very spiritually deep thing. While there is the aspect of the rock and roll concert, or groupies, or partying, or drugs, or alcohol, whatever, essentially what that really is an expression of celebration. And this is what these roots reggae singers and artists like Bob Marley, and in that Bob Marley tradition, were actually trying to do, is bring people to the gathering, hit them with the reggae rhythm known as the Nyabingi, the roots reggae rhythm. It's the heartbeat rhythm, stems from Africa, and then hit them with the messages that they want. And coming from the Rasta movement, coming from the descendants of the slavery movement, coming from being people of color, the messages are quite different than what you hear in the Western world, and definitely different than what I heard growing up in San Jose, California.
Right.
So as I began to learn more and more about reggae, I also had a little bit of a passion about ancient history. One of my favorite books of all time is Graham Hancock's Fingerprints of the Gods. And in that he talks about the possibility and evidence to support the idea that there was a global civilization on Earth sometime before the last cataclysm, metaphorically seen as a biblical flood. It's not really 2,000 years old as the Bible would have us think. It's 10 to 13,000 years old, maybe older, depending on which Hancock book you look at. He's revised his theories a couple times. But he was telling about ancient kingdoms, one of which he briefly touched upon was Ethiopia. And so, there comes a connection.
Right.
The ancient kingdom of Ethiopia. This is what these roots reggae singers oftentimes sing about, or these Rastafari guys who are not always roots reggae singers, but the ideology of their Rastafari crossed over with the rhythm and the roots of that rhythm coming from Africa, turning into the Nyabingi heartbeat rhythm. The messages and the rhythm merged, arguably in the late 50s to 60s, and then it becomes this potent vehicle now that's literally gone around the world. You could argue that it's more popular than rock and roll, and that it's informing people about more true versions of alternative history, more true versions of the spiritual potential of the self, and describing aspects of control and subjugation that you just don't get in Western pop culture, and especially pop music. I mean, you don't hear this kind of stuff with Britney Spears.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the more I researched other books like Graham Hancock's Fingerprints of the Gods, the more these themes started to arise. The roots reggae artists are talking about lost books of the Bible. Well, so are these Western fringe scholars. The roots reggae artists are singing about the truer history of humankind, and that's what these Western fringe thinkers are describing. And, you know, guys like, not just Graham Hancock, but, I mean, guys like Jordan Maxwell or David Icke or Michael Tessarian or William Henry or Jim Mars, they're talking about this revisionist or alternative ancient history of which us mass society humans today aren't privy to. And, you know, the formula starts to cross over in when you that the prophet Garvey out root stand to that effect. This
Brett, let me stop you for a second because I think we are having problems with your phone. We're going in and out. I know you said there was a possibility that we could connect some other way.
Yeah.
All right, let me do
Yep.
the okay. Well, hold on one second. Let me cue up something here for everyone, and we'll go to a quick little break. I'll connect with you. We'll get the new number and go from there. So hold 1 second. Let me get this set up for everyone. We apologize, everybody. We're going to just, like I said, just get this going the right way. And we're going to play a little music, of course. We're going to play some Bob Marley for you. Yes, here's one of my favorites. This is off of the Songs of Freedom album. It's his acoustic melody. Beautiful, beautiful piece here. A lot of his songs all mixed in one. So enjoy this. As soon as we get the connection problem, we'll be right back. So, but I know everyone will love the music. You are listening to Shadows in the Dark, broadcasting live at shadowsinthedarkradio.com and Dark Plains Radio at darkplainsradio.com. The show can also be heard as a rebroadcast at ParaX at para-x.com and available as a podcast at Black Vault Radio at blackvaultradio.com and Planet Paranormal at planetparanormal.com.
Have you been wondering what gift to get that special person in your life? Then you need to visit Mountain View Candle Works, your one-stop headquarters for candles, fountains, specialty foods, and much more. Just visit www.mountainviewcandleworks.com. We make your candles with mountain care.
More than just another New Age journal, Mysteries Magazine provides a thought-provoking, in-depth look into myths, magic, and the paranormal, as well as the mysteries which have intrigued both historians and scientists from the beginning of time. So subscribe today by visiting www.mysteriesmagazine.com or pick up a copy at select newsstands throughout the U.S. and Canada. Again, that was www.mysteriesmagazine.com. Challenge your beliefs. All right, everyone, we have connected back with Bret. So, Bret, I apologize for that, but everything is back in order now. So, and you sound good.
Wonderful.
So, great. All right. Now, I wish I really kind of knew where exactly the problem started there. But I can say that there was a question from the chat room asking about if you'd kind of give a little bit more of an explanation on, let me find it again. Oh, where was it at? You know, these chat rooms get crazy. You had mentioned it earlier. It started with an N, I can tell you that. The Nyabingi, was it?
Yes.
Yes.
The Nyabingi. That is a really unique word. It originally meant death to white oppressors. Some will say death to black and white oppressors, or just death to oppressors. But it's evolved into being the name of not only a drumming troupe or mystical order from Ethiopia, the Order of the Nyabingi, but it's also the name of the heartbeat rhythm of which the Roots Rastas are a proponent of. And this would be, you know, if the slaves are from Africa and they get put on the ship and they have all the culture still in them, they get to Jamaica and slowly start getting their culture stripped away. Well, they always remembered the drum, and even through different time periods where the drum was banned or they were shunned from playing the drum, they still, even though they lost their really multi-rhythmic, multi-layered drumming, and it just kind of whittled down to this one main beat, the heartbeat. And that's what's really survived from Africa. And this is, if you're going to look at this as a spiritual battle, which is what a lot of these roots reggae artists do, and that they're literally on a mission to go around the world to alter consciousness for the greater good, then you would have to look at this Nyabingi, this heartbeat rhythm, as their number one weapon. If you want to look at the other side, let's say the proponents or the architects of modern society, they're bombarding human consciousness, mass consciousness, with a number of different frequencies, which are also rhythms. Rhythms are frequencies. They're one and the same. Vibrations, rhythms, frequencies are all the same thing. And so that this Nyabingi now would be the counter rhythm for the hypnosis that has been put upon mass society with all those little rhythms. The rhythms of commercials, say, the rhythms of pop music. Again, I hate to keep picking on Britney Spears, but there's thousands of other ones like Britney Spears, where they're just a 2 to 4 minute pop song that takes you a little bit out of consciousness and then kind of whips you right back into reality. So you don't really get a chance to go out there, which is what the rhythm provides a human with an opportunity to do. To actually, when you listen to it long enough and start to focus on it and maybe breathe with it and then dance and move with it, you begin to alter your consciousness, and now you're in a space literally where psychologists are able to program patients, and this they're not learning this from psychologists. This is the drum has taught them this for thousands of years, going back to Africa. So yeah.
Well, let's. I want to take a look at Rastafarianism, because obviously this is, part of what we're talking about here is the music of these roots reggae singers, and even that, just Rastafarianism in general. Let's look at some of their beliefs and what exactly this religion revolves around. And like I said, I'm pretty familiar with it. I know it starts off especially with, and of course I may have the pronunciation wrong, but Haile Selassie III, correct? Was the Emperor of Ethiopia?
Haile Selassie I. He might be the third. I'm not aware that he's the third, but he is definitely, he claims to be the 225th in line in the House of David, in the direct line of Ethiopian kings, going all the way back to Solomon and Sheba. And of course, that whole story, biblical story, is connected to the Ark of the Covenant. Graham Hancock wrote a really good book, The Sign and the Seal. He's traced the Ark of the Covenant to a church in, I think it's Aksum in Ethiopia, where only a small handful, or maybe even just one, the bishop is only allowed to look at it. They bring a symbol of it called a tableau out once a year and parade it around town. So this is the kind of biblical tradition that Rastafari is based on. Although it's drawn from a wide variety of sources, it was actually, the word Rastafari is actually Emperor Haile Selassie's given name.
Right.
And it allegedly means peace of prince, or prince of peace, excuse me. And being the 225th in line of the House of David also got him the moniker of the Lion of the House of Judah, which each successive king in that line took on that moniker. He had many, many different monikers, but what the fusion became was when Marcus Garvey, although people were talking about Rastafari and using that word, it's actually two words, Ras, R-A-S, and Tafari, capital T-A-F-A-R-I. Before that word was scrunched together, or those two words were scrunched together into one word, there were people talking about Rastafari. Leonard Howell, for example, set up the first Rasta commune in Jamaica in 1940, I believe it was. And but you're not calling it Rastafarian at that time yet. It's not really until Marcus Garvey comes along and does his prophecy of the Black King coming out of the East, out of Africa, to unite a people and then bring the people home back to Africa, the repatriation movement. So you get all this kind of stuff mixed in with the Bible, and you get various versions of native shamanism, for a blanket kind of a term. The Mial men, for example, were an early religious group of the natives, descendants of the slaves, that practiced different versions of their African customs with mixed in with the Christianity from the slave masters. So you get these early mixes early on before Rasta comes out here in the 1940s. Really is when you see the roots of it start to come in Jamaica. Of course, Haile Selassie was coronated in the 1930s, so there's the big debate whether Rastafarianism is from Africa or if it's from Jamaica. Right. It appears to be from both. You got the roots of everything is from Africa. The universal tenets of love and peace and justice are arguably older than Africa itself. But then you get to Jamaica, you get through the prophecies of Marcus Garvey, and you get this fusion starting to happen on the island. The rhythms are starting to meet up with the ideologies, and then Garvey's prophecy comes in, and you get this explosion of consciousness really coming out of Kingston that's poured all over the world in the form of this roots reggae music backed of this basic rhythm called the Nyabingi, the heartbeat rhythm. Mm-hmm. Do you want? I can give you much more detail if you'd like.
Well, like I said, I want to go into now. Haile Selassie is looked at as pretty much the Messiah. Is it correct?
Yeah, not all. See, this is another. I'll tell you, this whole writing this book has been a study in definitions of words and qualifying the definition of words, because some of these people get real specific about what happened. And there's actually disagreements. I've talked to President Brown in chapter 21 of my book, and he basically says that not all Rastafari see Haile Selassie as Jesus reincarnated on earth, which is the popular conception. There are many that do, but there are also those that realize that it's not necessarily the facts of the story that what people look at, but what really has united a people and brought a kind of a national self-esteem level up, so that they're not just a subservient slave race. They have to actually feel good about themselves. That it's this ideology, the story, that what becomes important. What is Haile Selassie a metaphor for? And so this is another connection with Jesus, because there's scholarship out there that says that there was really no man named Jesus Christ, and that it was really just a story that's been regurgitated. Right. There's a great book by Kersey Graves called I believe it's called The 16 previous crucified saviors or something along those lines. And it basically makes the case that the story we get handed to in the Bible of Jesus is really a regurgitated story that happened at least 16 times in recorded history. So again, you could split hairs all day long about was it real, was it not, was Haile Selassie the second coming of Christ, was he not? There's a camp of Rastas out there that believe that it really doesn't matter, that you're wasting your time arguing about it. Just look at what the metaphor is. This guy was a symbol to unite a people. And no matter if he was true or not, that is provable. People claim that that's what's happened to them, that this is a catalyst for the crystallization, for the unitedness of a mentality of a race of people that have been displaced through colonialism. So, this is really an interesting subject. If you want to get back into the history of Haile Selassie, Italy's involved. Italy invaded Ethiopia. There's people that believe that Haile Selassie maybe fostered that invasion. There's others that believe he tried everything to do to stop it. There's evidence of Freemasonry coming in and propagandizing stuff. The legendary P2 faction that I've read about in so many good books, David Icke and Jim Marrs, whatnot. This is really so tied into, if guys like David Icke or Jordan Maxwell or Jim Marrs again, Michael Tessarian, if these guys go back to ancient Samaria as the roots of modern civilization, no matter what color, what race, or culture you're from, then this is one facet of the story that's really been overlooked. Because when you get right down to it, Ethiopia, the roots of Ethiopia, the biblical roots in Ethiopia, go back as old as anything else that we have on Earth, at least that we can prove. The Indian Vedas, the Bhagavad Gita, and other ancient texts could be 5,000 years old. Some say they're hundreds of thousands of years old. So we're getting into this range with Ethiopia where you can't really tell for sure. And so it's really connected to, if these other, we'll call them conspiracy scholars, although I don't like the C word, if these other type of scholars are convinced that it's back to Samaria, where the origins of any type of global consciousness suppression scenario were to take place, then Ethiopia is tied right to that through this ancient history facet. And of course the Bible is too. The Bible's been edited so many times.
Right.
Do we even really know what's real? There's got to be some real reality to it. There's a lot of scholarship that points to it. What exactly is and isn't? Well, that's the big debate. What are we left with is a story or a metaphor, and how does that metaphor apply to us in our daily lives now? And I think this is what I talk about in my book, is that there's this new emergent faction of Rastas that aren't part of any of the known groups like the Bobo Dreads or the Black Youth Faith or the Comsums. There's several other groups. They can often be very dogmatic. They could be they've been alleged to be oppressive against women, oppressive against certain groups like the Bobo Dreads, for example, have been known to be oppressive against homosexuality, saying it goes against the Bible. There's these little dogmatic limitations to these groups, but there's an emergent group that's really taking on the moniker of the universal themes of love, peace, justice, and tolerance. So that it doesn't matter if you're black or white, or you're man or woman, or if you have dreadlocks or not, or if you're gay or straight. It's about whether or not you're on the heart path. And what really blew my awareness open of the whole scene was Nancy Red Star's Star Ancestors trilogy, which talks about how when Native Americans do rituals, oftentimes they are visited by both extraterrestrial and ultra-terrestrial beings in whatever forms. They're doing the same kind of rituals as these Rasta guys in Jamaica, and then the roots reggae artists as they go around the world. They're essentially doing the same things. They're using the drum. They're using a type of vocal chanting or lyrics, and they're educating their people. It's an oral tradition stemming from Africa. But when I realized that the natives were starting to join these roots reggae artists at concerts around the world, and I'm a big fan of the Reggae Rising, the former Reggae on the River here in California on Highway 101 on the Eel River. I've been watching these Caneste elders Yurok elders, Pomo elders, and various other elders gathered from all over the nation and sometimes other countries. They come to give opening ceremonies, and this was just a really fascinating point for me. Why would they be doing this? Why would they be coming to a mostly white festival and showing them their secret traditions? And the answer is really fascinating. It's because of magic. Mm-hmm. And this is basically the thrust of my work. It's not just with music and with the Rastas, although this book that you have is volume 1 of a 3-part series. What my work is going to revolve around for the rest of my career is this idea of magic and how the world really is ruled by magic and magical principles and energies. So this is what the Rastas are doing. They have their own, the roots reggae artists, they have their own magic that they work in the form of concerts. And they're going around countering, we'll call it the societal magic, the magic that induces a mild hypnosis that enables people to deny their power on a much more full level. And then you can't see this more apparent than in court today, where you're literally in a ritual setting designed to throw you off center, confuse your consciousness, and then the first thing you want to do is panic and give up your power to somebody called an attorney. This is just a metaphor, I believe, for what's going on in society today, and that the Roots Reggae Rastas, as I describe in my book, that's the name I give the new emergent faction of the Rastas that have this universal tolerance, and they're just worried about what the fruits of your labor are, what path are you on. So, anyway.
Yeah, well, on those lines, like I said, I can, in terms of reggae, obviously, I'm more familiar with Bob Marley, and you through his music, you definitely hear a lot of that. And to me, it's reggae includes a lot of spiritualism, and of course, Bob Marley was very political as well. He was worried about what was going on during his times. And then, of course, a lot about love, just the just having love, all through you, within you, and for everyone. It seemed to be those things that kind of message ran through his music.
You're absolutely right, and that's no secret to why he's globally popular. I mean, you could go to Africa, and they've probably never heard of AC/DC.
Right.
But you mentioned Bob Marley, and their eyes just light up. I mean, he's a symbol for third world nations, for indigenous peoples. He's like the pinnacle, the spearhead, if you will, of the summation of all those ethics into one, and then you take that out around the road on a tour. And so, I've spoken to Luciano about how he feels like he's one of these old troubadours from the Bible that used to take the messages of love and the Lord out into the people on the land. And that's, back then, that's oral traditions were the only thing you had back then. So Bob Marley is he's the figurehead. And I get a little tired of talking about Bob Marley, but that's not to underscore his importance.
Right. Well, he's seen as a prophet, right?
He is seen as a prophet. Some people see him as a Christ-like figure.
Yeah.
Roger Steffens, the famed Wailers archivist and publisher of the Beat magazine, he likes to call Bob Marley a shaman, and I would totally agree. That guy was working magic on levels that people like me are just figuring out unless you were really in on the movement. See, again, I'm white. I'm from Western culture, modern culture, and so this is all news to me for sure. Being an outsider.
Yeah. I'm white and from the mountains of Western North Carolina. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Bob Marley isn't a big thing around here, but it is here. I mean that interest in reggae music is here, but it all does come from Bob Marley, and I guess that's why he comes up so much. Is it seems to be the starting point for a lot of people.
On an international level, that's true. If you go to Jamaica, you can argue that there's a bunch of other people that came before Bob.
Right.
But it's not until Bob is the one that took it international. And what I argue in my book is that's why these Roots Reggae Rastas are at the forefront of what anthropologists are calling in the West today a cultural revitalization movement. And that is where the lifestyles and practices that have got us to where we are today no longer work for us. So our society's in this transition where we need to figure out a new way to live that's sustainable. We got the pollution today, we got the chemicals in our foods, many other things that just they've got us to where we are, but are not sustainable. So we need a new story is how as research goes. So we've got this story that we've been living by, but we don't know how to live by a new story until we adopt a new story. Well, according to various sources now, what it appears is that these Roots Reggae Rastas are going to provide us with that story, the story of Exodus. Again, a big Bob Marley song, Exodus.
Right.
Because that is the biblical classic story for humanity to switch stories. That is the transition story, Exodus. We're fleeing from one story, and we're going to embrace a new story, and even though we don't know what that new story is right now. In Chapter 2 of my book, I have the pleasure of interviewing Hank Wesselman. He's a paleoanthropologist who got his degree out of Cal Berkeley. He's over in Hawaii right now. He wrote a series of books, the Spirit Walker trilogy, where he has these out-of-body experiences from a descendant of his 5,000 years into the future who happens to be Hawaiian and who's telling of the history of the Hawaiian Islands and how their traditions came to be. And it's this really fascinating tale backwards and forwards in time. He being a paleoanthropologist at the same time, it's not been good for PR. He's kind of had to cross the same boundaries as Carlos Castaneda. If you remember Carlos Castaneda, The Fire Within, Journey to Ixtlan, those kind of shamanic books, he was fired from UCLA when he started telling them he was using ayahuasca. So Hank Wesselman comes along and says, no, I'm not going to use drugs, I'm just going to use the rhythm. And so while he's talking about this global transformation, this movement towards a new story for humanity, a new way to live, he's also validating these experiences scientifically through his anthropology background. And when his detractors try to come scoff at him or make him look bad, well, there's no drugs to throw at him. So they really have nowhere to go except accept his work. So Hank Wesselman is really important. He threw into me the power of the rhythm as he uses a rattle to get into a shamanic state. And I had the privilege of watching this guy heal a lady of what was claimed to be a 10th generation scar that was wrought on her soul from when her village got massacred 10 generations ago. It was a really powerful emotional experience. I've never seen anything like it, and I don't know if I fully know what happened at that time, but it was, I'll never forget it. My goosebumps are everywhere. Right. So this kind of stuff is real. So while Wesselman was really important for me because he provided both the knowledge of the rhythm and then the scientific basis for the rhythm, but then also he brought to my attention this idea of global consciousness transformation. And so then when you look out at the movements around the world, the different PR campaigns, if you will, there is no bigger PR campaign from indigenous circles other than the Roots Reggae artists. They've gone around the world, and literally I believe, and I make the case in my book, I argue that they are representative of the collective indigenous philosophies of one love, of tolerance for all, following the heart path, connecting with your higher self, living more in a natural way, maybe slowing down, removing our own, doing what we can to remove our own mentality, frequencies that are, again, societally hypnotized us, to listen to those stupid commercials. They have those rock riffs on commercials now. I'll listen to a darn Chevy commercial, and I got that stupid Skynyrd song in my head for 5 minutes. I can't get it out. So, yeah, deep spiritual stuff. The Rastas, I believe, are spearheading this movement. They've gone around the world and shown that. They've proven that they've gone around the world more than anyone else, more than the Tibetans. The Dalai Lama's got to Hollywood. That was big for him. Yeah. The Hopis have been around the world as well. But none of these movements really, as a campaign, have the power of the rhythm behind them except the universal philosophy of these Roots Reggae Rastas. So that's why I think they're so important. That's why Bob was so important.
Right. Now, we got to get ready to take a break here in a minute. I want to give you one more question. And obviously, you had the opportunity to interview, some of these reggae musicians.
Right.
How much patois did you learn?
How much? Say that again. How much what?
How much patois?
What's that?
That and maybe you may pronounce it differently, but that's basically the language, the mix of the patois.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Well, that was a good example of my early interviews right there. These guys were speaking the patois, and I had no idea what the hell they were talking about. And they would just start whipping it out real fast, and I would understand a couple words here and there, and I was thinking it was English, but they were talking too fast, but that was the wrong approach. I literally had to get my first 3 or 4 interviews translated from a local reggae guy here in Chico, California, when I was just starting to cut my teeth in local music magazines. And it took a while to learn, and then especially because they talk it so fast. But that's a really fascinating part of this whole study, because the slaves in Jamaica began to realize that the English that they were being taught was actually subversive to their own spiritual power. And the most prime example I can give is the use of the word I. Mm-hmm. If we here in the West say, I did this, I did that, me, myself, I, the slave descendants and then later the Rastafaris believe that's cutting off half of yourself, and that your other self, your higher spirit self, is the other I. So instead of saying, I did this, I did that, which is they believe is subjugative, consciously and spiritually, they say I and I, because right. Then that embraces the full reality of the picture in their view. And they've done this with a bunch of different words, and literally turned English on its side, or even backwards. They believe it's a backwards language designed for control. The work of Leonard Horowitz backs this up. If you've read Pirates of the Sacred Spiral or Healing Celebrations, he uses a Pythagorean skein to unravel the code of English. And according to Horowitz, English is actually made backwards. And so if you're speaking a backwards language, you're programming your brain in a backwards way that's probably not good for the natural state and abilities of a human being. And again, Horowitz, from one end of the Western fringe occult spectrum, is coming with research that matches this third world indigenous philosophy. One uses scientific research or journalistic research. The other uses the drum. So, or a combination. But the drum is in there. They don't invalidate what they experience in altered states induced by the drum. That's very real to them. And that's a big distinction between that third world thought and the first world thought.
Now, Bret, before we go to a break, give everybody your website, and where is your book available at, Song in Your Heart?
Right now, my book is only available through my website. I have not got a distribution deal yet, but that's next. My website, I have 2 websites. Right now, they filter into one website, which will in the future be 2 websites. But right now, it's BretLueder.com. That's BretLueder.com. And then the other is EsotericGuide.com, and that's ESOTERIC guide.com.
All right, wonderful. We're going to take a quick break, everybody. When we return, we're going to continue talking about roots reggae and what exactly is behind this movement with our guest tonight, Bret Lueder. Well, tonight our guest is Bret Lueder, if you're just joining us, just so you're informed there, and we are talking about roots reggae and exactly kind of the message that is sent through the music and through Rastafarianism. Bret, I've got some questions from the chat room that they were bringing up, and here in a minute we're going to open up the lines for anybody who wants to call in, and we'll give out that toll-free number. So, so for those who do want to call in, just hang tight, and we will definitely get to you. Now, first off, it's kind of some that was being talked about. Well, I want to ask you this first. Someone was asking if you had seen a movie. They really seemed to want this. It was called Countryman. Yes. Have you seen the movie Countryman?
No, I have not.
All right. Well, that question come from Dennis in the chat room. Apparently, it's about a plane crash on the island of Jamaica, and this Rasta takes them in and teaches them about Rastafarianism. Said it was a great movie, so maybe something you might want to check out.
I absolutely will. I appreciate the heads up on that.
All right. All right. The other is definitely 2 of the other iconic things within Rastafarianism, and of course, one is the dreadlocks. Honestly, it is. They don't cut their hair. True Rastafarianism, maybe "true" is the wrong word, but those really deep into Rastafarianism do not cut their hair, and they have the dreadlocks. What is the meaning of the dreadlocks, or is there one behind it?
The locks. That is the dread. The hair is the symbol of the real history, of the real roots, of the spiritual power of the individual human being. And it started out where that became a symbol of the Rastas, but that's really not all Rastas have dreadlocks. There's actually a faction of Rastas called the Komsums that believe that it's more proper to have short hair, neatly kempt hair. So while we were talking over the break, I had a chance to dig out a lyric actually from a Tony Rebel song that has to do with the use of not using the razor, and it goes right back to the Bible, and he mentions the exact the passage. This is from Tony Rebel's 1994 hit Nazarite Vow. Me check Samson and John the Baptist, them grow them natty dread, make it long like whist. Who? Me start fi grow me dread some more when we read Ezekiel 44. So me people have spread propaganda about long hair is a sin, but me challenge anyone, but we know them can't win. So you're looking at, again, they're drawing off the Bible for this stuff, and why we get such splintered factions is because of the interpretation. I mean, we see this in our own society. How many factions of Christianity do we have in America? 500 or more? I'm not exactly sure. But it's the same thing with the Rastas. Once the words get out there, there's a chance they're going to be interpreted in different ways. So this is again why this new emergent faction of the Roost Reggae Rastas, they're not worried about interpretations. They're not worried about facts. They're just, what path are you on? Right. Are you following your heart? Are you good to your neighbor? Do you try to help people in need? That type of thing. Do you live in a just manner? That type of thing. So the power of the dreadlocks became an early symbol, of the Rastas. But at the same time, today, just at Reggae Rising this year, maybe half of them have dreadlocks and half of them don't.
Now, do you find with the Rastas that you interviewed and got to meet that they are very true to their religion, to Rastafarianism? And I bring this up because we were discussing this in the chat room earlier. Of course, I'm going to bring Bob Marley back up, but he more or less, not more or less, he did. He died because of his faith. He got cancer in his toe due to a soccer injury and refused to have it amputated because of his beliefs, which were based on the Bible, not to mutilate the body, and thus the cancer spread, leading to his death.
Yeah, and also not just that, but that too. But he also adhered to more tribal beliefs as well. He was seeing a spiritual healer at the time who he thought was going to be able to help.
Right.
So again, they never leave the roots of Africa. They never leave those tribal roots, those pagan roots, as we did call it in the West. Mm-hmm. And you could argue that. So you could argue from that standpoint, well, you don't mutilate your body. That's from the Bible. But at the same time, he's dealing with a spiritual medical healer and medical intuitive, if you will, shaman of some kind. And so that kind of seems to be juxtaposed to believing in the Bible. But again, you look at the history of the Bible, and the Bible's roots are in paganism. And a lot of people tend to forget that, or maybe not even know that. So it's kind of tricky. Do you say, well, because he believed in the Bible, he didn't get help? Well, he was actually seeking help, which you could argue maybe is biblical, the medical intuitive. There's all kinds of shamanic tales in the Bible. Many have been written out of the Bible. Of course, this older stories of Jesus from his youth have to do with him being a magical being, having supernatural powers. Of course, Moses and Aaron, they're known magicians from back in the Bible. The lost books of Moses, supposedly he's written more than 5, and then up to 7 books or maybe more that he's alleged to have written after that, they all have to do with magic. So, and then of course Bob Marley, who's been called a shaman by credible people like Roger Steffens, who've studied this man's life, and so you get this weird mix of stuff. You get biblical power with tribal, pagan practice at the same time. Did Bob Marley die from the wound in his toe? It appears that way. There's a lot of controversy surrounding that. Roger Steffens can be seen on 2 VH1 shows. I forget which one it is. It's either the Bob Marley Legends show or there's a Legends album series where Bob Marley's Legend, I think, is part of that, where he said that there was a CIA conspiracy, that there was a roadie that was a part of the Bob Marley entourage who was a part of the CIA, and that was Don Taylor comes in with his book, Marley and Me, kind of corroborating that. Timothy White comes in with Catch a Fire, that book talking about CIA documents. But then Roger Steffens later in the Beat magazine, I forget exactly what issue, interviews Carl Colby Jr., which is the son of the alleged roadie who was in the CIA. And Steffens kind of switches his story now. He believes that there was nothing to that. Right. I don't know. I can tell you what Marley and his entourage thought at the time was that he definitely was being attacked by dark forces and forces from Babylon, the symbol of all that's evil to the Rastafari, in reference to the evil city in the Bible, the city of Babylon. Mm-hmm. They definitely saw it that way, as a spiritual battle, that he was being attacked, and that he needed to seek spiritual forces to counter it. Mm-hmm. This is another example of my own path where I'm coming across these word definitions, and I would be talking with these really peaceful and spiritually oriented Rasta guys, and I'd get a little detail wrong, and they would light up like a candle and go off in the big diatribe about the specifics of the splitting of the hair of what we were just discussing. This would be another example, what the question you just asked me. Another one is, where does Rastafari originate? There's the people that feel it's originated in Jamaica formally, but that some people say, no, it started in Africa. Well, they're kind of both right, So the study of Rasta, the study of roots reggae Rastas and reggae music is really, you got to define your terms. And being an outsider like I was, boy, that held me back for a lot of years, trying to define terms, get into a consensus about what the Rastas themselves, how they define their terms, because there's not even a consensus in some areas there too. So, and again, this is why I've noticed that there's an evolving faction, because there's some Rastas that just, they don't want to get into those kind of discussions of splitting hairs. It's just, where is your heart? Where is your mind? And then move on from there, and it saves a bunch of hassle, a bunch of in some views unnecessary reasoning sessions. But I myself, I like to reason, I like to debate and make statements and support them, and that's fun for me. So,
well, what about, of course, one of the other things is the smoking of marijuana. Where does that even stand today in the Rastas today? As I mean, most people, when they think Rastafarianism, it's one of the first things that pops in their head: dreads and weed. Sure,
yeah, no doubt. The image fueled by Hollywood images. I remember a Steven Seagal movie back in maybe the early '90s. Where they were battling the Jamaican voodoo posses, who were running cocaine through the big cities and using magic to get the job done, and so you get these images making the paganness, the ritual, even the people of color in the third world nations seeing him as dark, bad, evil, and to be feared. I think this is partially the same with marijuana. In America today, we have the drug war. It's perpetrated against a drug where they can document very few deaths per year attributed to it, as opposed to alcohol, which is into the thousands or maybe even tens of thousands of injuries and fatalities each year. But that the usage of marijuana really, you can argue, goes back to the Bible. And again, the Rastas talk about it being a sacrament, and that you smoke the sacrament in the chalice in a certain ritual to connect with the Creator. And this is where the Rastas come off with this idea. My research shows that it can be traced back to the 1940s to the Leonard Howell commune, the what's dubbed as the first ever Rasta commune, even though I don't think that the two words Rastafari had merged into one word yet at that point. He was definitely preaching about Haile Selassie, but they were the first to introduce ganja. They grew their own ganja, they made food with it, they cooked with the oils, which is extremely healthy, and they smoked it in a sacramental form. And so, various factions have used it. Others don't put as much emphasis on it. But what the roots reggae Rastas will say, and this is part of being an emergent faction, the new philosophy, the more tolerant philosophy, is that every person has the right to decide for themselves how much marijuana they should or shouldn't smoke. So if you want to partake in it, then it's one valid, viable avenue to connect to the Creator. If you don't, that's your choice, and there's many, many other avenues to reach the same place, as history shows.
Right, yeah, definitely. Now, Brett, I'm going to open up the lines right now. Well, let's see. I know we had one that did want to call in. For those who do want to call in, the number is 877-876-7797. I'm going to give that one more time. 877-876-7797. Now, that is toll-free for, I know, for the U.S., I believe possibly Canada, unfortunately not for overseas if you are tuning in from elsewhere. I'm going to just type in the chat room too, as a matter of fact. Yeah, I mean, it's, it's all, well, it didn't take long for that call to come in. Here we go, let's take this. All right, caller from, I believe it was 386. What's your name and where are you from?
Hi, Gary Frick.
Hey, Gary, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I am fine, and I'm going to see if I can adjust your volume a little bit, or if you can hold the phone away just a bit, because I don't want to mess up Brett's volume as well. But, Gary, you got a question?
My volume's too loud?
Yeah, it's pretty loud. Trying to adjust it just a bit. But, Gary, do you have a question for Brett, or something you want to discuss with him?
Yes, how do I sound now?
Even louder.
I can hear you fine.
Yeah.
That time I was kidding. Okay, this is my regular voice.
All right.
How are you doing?
Doing wonderful. Thanks for calling.
It's my pleasure. Yeah, we've been having some discussions in the chat room. One of them was somebody in the chat room, Bambi, was asking me, she was discussing maybe the connection between reggae music and connecting with universal spirit. Yeah. I know this has already been addressed, but I'm phrasing it explicitly. What do you have to say about that?
I definitely would agree. There are many paths to the higher self, to the Creator, as the many religious traditions around the world attest to. But what's most potent, I believe, about this roots reggae version of shamanism, if you will, of its own path to a Creator, to your own higher self, is the power of the rhythm. And it's this Nyabingi heartbeat rhythm that it doesn't matter, it's cross-cultural, it's cross-race. It doesn't care if you're a man or woman. If you're a human being, you can connect with this rhythm, and that's one way. It's not even the only rhythm, but it's one main time-tested way of unlocking your consciousness, getting into an altered state of consciousness where shaman from time immemorial have attested to that these altered states are where you can commune with other spirits, you can commune with your higher self. In the Christian tradition, of course, we have angels, and there's, of course, the negative entities as well. What I believe this is really a version of is Gnosticism, where the early roots of Christianity, in other words, where individuals had the power to access these realms on their own and through their own connection. And so I think that's what these roots reggae Rastas are bringing back, is that it really doesn't matter who you are. If you want to connect with your higher self, if you want to expand your spirituality, if you want to connect to the cosmic consciousness, if you will, all you really need is a good rhythm. There's many other ways, of course, but a good rhythm is a time-tested way that, there's no laws against rhythm today, although there's laws against drugs, so a safer way to reach that can be drugs. or another way to reach it can be drugs, but a safer way may be to use the rhythm. So I would absolutely agree that this form of roots reggae rasta, a form of shamanism stemming from Africa, is definitely a viable way to access the higher realms, to the universal mind or cosmic consciousness, whatever term you're comfortable with.
I must admit that this is something I've learned. I mean, I know Celtic music, for example. How would you compare? I guess we're comparing apples and oranges to a point, but would you agree Celtic music and certain other types of music could also satisfy the same?
Absolutely. There's, the band Living Colour had their big hit, Cult of Personality. But that really doesn't tell the story of the band members, especially the guitarist Vernon Reid, who is really a jazz guitarist who had studied the similarities between African tribal music and Celtic roots music. And we have a really good Celtic music band here in Chico, California called the Pub Scouts. And you get those gals playing that little knuckle drum, and they've got polyrhythmic layers going on just like traditional African drumming, and they're using really weird time signatures like African drumming uses, and it points to a common ancestry really between the two cultures. And that's not the only thing. Stone monuments, there's words that are similar, there's traditions that are similar. There's this whole big school of thought that Scotland was started by Queen Scota, who is a descendant of an Egyptian pharaoh. So,
oh wow,
yeah. So there's all kinds of connections between Celtic Ireland and Africa, and really what this points to is the similarity of all the races. There really is no difference. The only differences we have are skin deep, and that the philosophy that the Hopi share with other native tribes, that there was an original indigenous migration, that after the last cataclysm, human beings came up in one point of the world and then migrated around the world to populate the entire world. And then here we are 10,000 or so years later, and our skin colors have changed. But in reality, we're still all the same. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, we're all related. Yes. Now, one type of music that's probably the most popular type of music in the United States today is hip hop. Mm-hmm. Do you see any potential there at all? I mean, for in any aspect of it to connect
in terms
with
of being a societally redeeming institution, in other words?
Yes.
I do, because again, it revolves around its own rhythm, the hip hop rhythm. It's I would say a little closer to the rock and roll rhythm. It's got more of the same cadence. But at the same time, it's the voice of a downtrodden people. Now, those people are angry, and so this is where you get a lot of this gangster rap, talking about the bitches and the hoes and the bling bling and the drugs and whatnot. I don't see that as negative necessarily, because it's really a valid expression of deeply suppressed anger and emotions. That how else do people like that deal with those emotions unless you give them an outlet like music? So
actually, it's interesting. Somebody in the chat room was saying something about reggae having a dark side to it, and I made the comment that, well, even if that is true, that could be a good thing, depending on how, if it's aggression or anger brought to surface and conscious awareness, that could be good.
It gives a person an opportunity to play out their feelings without hurting anybody. No. That's how I would look at it. I think the same is true with heavy metal in America and in the predominantly European roots society, where you have. Now this is getting real deep here. This is getting into my book where we're talking about the subjugation of human consciousness on a global level. Okay, the theory is that all peoples have roots and all peoples have native cultures. White people tend to forget that our roots aren't necessarily Christian. They're pagan, and many white people are descendants of Druidism or Druid culture from not just Ireland or Scotland or England, but also from Western Europe and even into Eastern Europe. There's arguments that this knowledge actually stems from Sumeria. Okay, so if there were going to be a group of humans or a group of beings which is, I make the case for that the global suppression that we experience today stems from off-world. If they were going to suppress a society, they were going to have to take over one of the tribes and then use that tribe's knowledge against them and then against the rest of the world. And what I believe happened is that they took over the Druids. They took over the white race. They wound up hiding a lot of those magical traditions and techniques, which are surfacing again today. And then once you remove, as Marcus Garvey says, once you remove the roots from the tree cannot stand. So now we have a bunch of Europeans that are malleable, that don't really understand what their history is, and they've been disconnected from their magical traditions, their higher spirit self connections. So Jordan Maxwell goes into this a bit, where he claims that it's the Druids that came to Hollywood to invent the movie industry for purposes of mass mind control. And so what I see heavy metal then is an extension of the deep-seated fear and anger that Europeans have towards giving up their own power, towards being usurped. And I'm not speaking about death metal necessarily. I know that's a big hot topic, this satanic metal. I don't listen to that. I know it's probably got its place. It's not really for me. I like to listen to other heavy metal that is more empowering and is, to me, that's how I would describe it, is it's harking to a darker time in European and maybe more specifically white history, where our power was lost, and then we literally gave it up for the hope of riches, for greed. And
now you mentioned everything being rooted in, or even Christianity being rooted in paganism. I know a lot of times in the Old Testament they talk doing away with idol worship. Mm-hmm. Do you see a connection there between that and what you were talking about?
Well, I think Christianity, while it works for many, many people, and I don't want to detract anyone from seeking the path that's comfortable for them, but what it appears from a historical standpoint is that there was a switch from polytheism to monotheism, and that Christianity had a lot to do with that. Whether that's a good or a bad thing, I'm not actually sure, because, like I just mentioned, many people find solace in Christianity in its form today. Others think it's just a dogmatic system that's been specifically designed for mind control. So there's both those views are prevalent, and you could argue on either side. I like to study the history, and when you get into the history, you realize that the Bible's been edited so many times that it calls into question the authenticity of the document we see today, at least. That's not to say that it doesn't have genuine roots, that there's good information, and that it came from somewhere genuine. But I think by the time we get to it today, I tend to fall on the side of the argument that it is very disempowering to somebody like me. We'll just say that. And so again, something like Rastafari, or the new version of Rastafari, as I identify in my book, it really speaks to someone like me, because it's not going to try to hold me to some kind of limitations or boundaries. The limitations are my own if I want to impose them on myself. Other than that, I have no limitations.
But do you believe there's one supreme being?
Absolutely. And no matter what culture has a name for it, I believe they're all talking about the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if it's go ahead.
I had one last question. It was about, you mentioned Bob Marley as a prophet. I thought of him as a reggae singer. The idea of him being a prophet never came to mind. But then again, a lot of people think of John Lennon as a prophet.
Sure.
Can a connection be made?
Absolutely. I think history has many, what I like to call avatars, that are born into this world, that are able to reach a certain level of personal awareness, that they see the bigger picture. And once you see the bigger picture, it becomes real clear to these people what their next step of action is, and that's in line with the bigger picture. A guy like John Lennon can be compared to Bob Marley, I believe, for the very fact that the powers that be, I believe, felt they had to do away with him. There's a big deal about how John Hinckley was a mind control victim that was planted mentally with suggestions to go kill. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe Hinckley was the guy that shot John Lennon. And then Bob Marley.
No, Hinckley was Reagan.
Oh, was that Reagan? Who was Hinckley? Who was the guy that shot? Okay.
David Chapman.
Mark David Chapman, thank you. For Bob Marley, it's been argued now that it wasn't a conspiracy by the CIA, but then again, Timothy White has documents that show that they actually kept a file on Bob Marley. So, they were aware, the powers that be, i.e. the CIA, or you could argue the United Nations, the elitists, the 9 global families, the Rockefellers, whatnot, they were definitely aware of Bob Marley and his power. And I believe that anytime a human being rises up and is able to be a leader on a level that will actually evoke change socially on Earth, those beings cannot be allowed to stay around if there's any kind of a plan for consciousness suppression, because those beings specifically are here to unlock consciousness. I would throw Jimi Hendrix in there. You could throw Jim Morrison in there.
All right.
You could make that case. Elvis. And then, of course, Michael Jackson. What does Michael Jackson and Elvis have in common? They're both the king. Okay, so you have this whole idea. I'll be speaking more about this at the Bay Area UFO Expo coming up on September 12th in Santa Clara, California. The ritual death of the masses. And this goes back to old European tradition. Again, another indication that it's the Druids that have been taken over and their magical traditions. Because this whole idea of killing the straw man, or killing death, or the Shrovetide bear, all these are references to, at the end of a harvest, you set up your straw man, and then you ritually burn the straw man as a cyclical symbol. There's death, leads into rebirth. So you could take that metaphor now to society, and that there's a facet of our birth certificate called the straw man, where there's an all-caps version of your name, and this all-caps version of your name is referred to as a straw man. And I believe what's happening is that straw man is being set up to be burned at the end of a rich spiritual harvest of humanity. So again,
now, do you think there was some? I'm sorry. I was wondering. Do you think there was some kind of conspiracy against Elvis and Michael Jackson too?
Well, I think it's possible that what happened was that they were ritually killed in line with the straw man. The king is always tied to the land in European tradition, and the wealth of the land is directly tied to the king. So if you kill the king before he has time to get old, the idea is you're able to sustain the prosperity. But if you keep the king around till he's 90 and he's decrepit, then the idea is the land gets that way too. So, gosh, if you were going to kill Michael Jackson, you couldn't really wait past now, because he's just going to deteriorate after now. He may have already been. Elvis was already kind of deteriorating. They had to kind of get rid of him now. Do I know that's true? I don't know it's true, but I know David Icke has done some really brilliant work on what he believes is the ritual sacrifice of Princess Diana for the same kind of reasons. She's the queen. You got to sacrifice the queen or the king for the benefit of the land and the people. It's just old European Druidic magic.
Well, thank you very much for answering my questions.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure.
Thanks, Gary, for calling in. All right, very interesting stuff there. Now, Bret, what about when you talk about the rhythm, as it's said by the Rastas there, the roots reggae? Is this something that they see as being very universal, not just through the music, but just there's a universal rhythm that flows through us all?
Absolutely. They believe that the Nyabengi is God, that the Nyabengi is equal to Jah, and that when you're listening to the Nyabengi, it's literally the words of God, speaking to your subconscious, speaking to your spirit or soul. Yeah, it's deep.
Yeah,
they realize that the universe is sound, and that everything is frequencies. And this is something that our own Western physicists have only come to the conclusion to, maybe, to be generous, in the last 100 years, probably less. So these guys have realized this for who knows how long, just by the usage of the drum.
Right.
Connecting to the higher knowledge.
Now, I know one other thing that we wanted to get into was, now, we're talking, reggae music here, but we need to kind of talk about the difference in roots reggae and what it also be referred to, dance hall reggae. There is a difference, yes.
There's a big difference. The dance hall is the pop music of Jamaica, which may have came out of roots reggae, evolved from it, but it's the more watered down, more hardcore, if you will. The beats are harder. The vocal style is more aggressive. The lyrics can be more aggressive. You can have aggressive lyrics with roots reggae as well, but they have a tendency to be more uplifting and empowering, as opposed to aggressive. But the difference really is in the beat. The roots reggae artists use the nyabingi, and to quote Roger Steffens, he says, if it's got the nyabingi, then it's the roots. If it doesn't have the nyabingi, it's not the roots. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the drum beat. It could be the guitar skank, or it could be the organ skank, or it could be the bass riffs are going to hold that nyabingi beat, or it could be all of them. Just depends on the mix of the music. But if it's got that in it, it's the roots. If it doesn't have that in it, it's more than likely dance hall, which are represented by guys like Capleton, Luton Fire I just saw at Reggae Rising. There's several others. A lot of them are Bobo Dreads. They wear the turbans around their head. And that stuff's really popular. I just saw Capleton at Reggae Rising earlier this month. And, boy, that guy didn't finish one song, I think, all the way through. Because there's this style that they have in Jamaica where they kind of break it down, and then he talks to the crowd, and then he starts up a new song. And then portions of the crowd go crazy. I didn't get it myself because I guess I'm more old school. I just like the roots. I like to listen to Bob Marley and Burning Spear and Jimmy Cliff and Luciano and some of the younger Marley brothers. Incidentally, Stephen Marley's newest album is called Mind Control. Right. So that kind of gives you an example of where they're just carrying on their father's legacy, carrying on the work, in line with the tradition.
Yeah, and many of his sons are. many.
That's right. Yes. Well, it's even arguable how many sons or daughters he has.
All right.
When I've written about Damian Marley, the publicist at Tough Gong just told me put 11 siblings. Or 11 kids, and we'll just leave it at that. Some say there's 13. Some argue that there's more. More could come out in the future.
Right, and I know the ones who have definitely went into music, of course, Ziggy, Stephen, Damien, what is one he refers to himself as Junior Gong, don't he?
Yeah, that's Damien.
Is that Damien? Okay.
Yeah, Junior Gong is Damien, yeah.
Okay, Junior, and there's what is there another? Is it Julian?
There's Julian, yeah.
Yes.
Julian, Stephen, Ziggy, Damien, Kaimani. I believe there's even a sister, and I forget what her name is.
Sadella.
What's that?
Sadella.
No, Sadella I thought was the grandmother, and she just passed away.
Well, I think they had one that was named after her, Sadella, because I think she played with, definitely started with Ziggy Marley and the Melody Makers.
Okay. You might know more than I do, so.
Sure. I just say, I'm not saying that's 100%, but I believe her name was Sadella, not real sure. But yeah, I mean, they're a very musical family for sure. Now, and we don't have a lot of time left, so this may be kind of the last thing we kind of discuss, but when this rhythm gets a hold of you, what does it do? What happens?
Well, this would be something that I really can only describe for myself.
Right.
That's the only experience I have to go on. You can read about it in books, but that really doesn't do anything unless you experience it yourself. What I found is that if you first understand what the rhythm can do, then you can actually consciously work with it. You can align your breathing with it, align your dancing or your movement with it, and when your body is in sync with it, that's when your consciousness, it's hard to put a finger on when your consciousness starts to expand, but at a certain point you realize that maybe your awareness of the whole crowd around you, you're even aware of the crowd behind you, even though you can't see them. Or maybe some people have claimed that they actually rise up above the crowd, and that they're like looking from a perch and overlooking all the heads of the people. You're getting into many books have been written on altered state experiences. channeling, shamanism, kundalini activation, astral projection. I mean, all these things really are all summed up with consciousness expansion. What is the true potential of a human spirit? I don't know. And I think that's why essentially I wrote the book, because I'd like to know. I've been told I have this spiritual potential. I've been told that I'm a male, been brought up in a male-dominated society, so that as a male in this male-dominated society, I have this other feminine part of me that I don't know anything about, and I'm out of balance with it. What's that all about? There's all these, your mind is like an onion, and so unless you know there's layers to peel, you just got the surface.
Right.
And that's how I approach it, is that it's the altered states are unpeeling the onion layer by layer. And so again, in the Hawaiian tradition, as told to me by Hank Wesselman, there's 4 levels of reality that can be discussed between your teacher and the student, or your guide and the guidee. But then after that, there's 8 levels of reality that can only be discussed with yourself, because they're for you and you only. And you don't talk about them with anyone else, because no one else can help you with it. Only you can experience it. So unless the individual takes that upon themselves, there's really, you can only have other people's experiences of their own experience, other people's description of their own experience, and that may or may not have anything to do with your own path and your own experience. So the real wisdom, I think, that comes out of this new evolution of Rasta, which is really an old ethic, is a Gnostic ethic, if you will, is that enlightenment is to be had by the individual. And it's up to the individual what that experience is going to be like, and it's up to the individual how deep they want to go. Because from what I see, there's really no limits. There's only the limits that the self puts on the self.
All right. Yeah. Now, for those who have listened to tonight's show or will listen to it in the archives, and who have maybe never got into reggae music, where would you say for them to get started? Who maybe some material to read, or some musicians specifically to listen to that would really show what we're talking about tonight?
Well, there's the classic, of course, Bob Marley. You can't have a discussion like this and leave his name out of it. He's arguably the most, let's say, user-friendly version of roots reggae music that I think is out there. At least he was the first. There's others that have come that have imitated that style and done very well. Luciano would be another example of a modern-day kind of a Bob Marley-type figure. Even though he's on his own path, he does his own thing, he still carries those same messages. He uses the Nyabingi. He's a very gentle person, likes to help people, is very good with his fans. Some of the older greats that are still around, I would absolutely recommend Burning Spear, Jimmy Cliff, Toots, of course. I just saw him. He's 60-something years old. I just saw him at Reggae Rising. Just knock it home, knock it out of the park. The Marley Brothers, of course. If you want to get into the more hardcore root stuff, you could go to Capleton, although he's more dancehall beats. He definitely has rootsy lyrics. He's always bashing on Babylon and that metaphor of Babylon in conjunction with the evil society today, and then also that mindset of Babylon where you're out to capitalize on your brother's suffering, or you're out to win the rat race, that type of thing. There's literally hundreds of artists out there that you just don't hear about because they don't play this stuff on mainstream radio very often. Another great tradition in reggae is the vocal harmony trio. So there's several vocal harmony trios that are worth checking out, like Israel Vibrations, legendary, Mighty Diamonds, legendary. Morgan Heritage is of the newer school, even though they got some pretty deep roots. The Itals, another Keith Porter and the Itals, another vocal harmony trio that's I think they have all 3 members still, although they haven't always been together. But these are the types of bands, really, they're part of history. So it's not just Bob Marley, it's all these other artists as well. Bob Marley just happened to be the one that took it international first.
Right.
And so that's a huge step. I mean, you can't argue with that. That's a huge step. But he definitely was not an originator of the sound. But he was definitely a purveyor of it and a master in his own right. So that's
Yeah.
a good list for people to get going on. ReggaeFestivalGuide.com is another great website to go check out reggae festivals around the world, and that'll give you an idea of all the stuff that's going on around the world. It's just popping up more and more. There's a big festival now in Monterey here in California. Of course, we got the Sierra Nevada World Music Festival. Heck, we probably got 10 to 12 international festivals here in Northern California throughout the year. I mean, so this stuff is growing and spreading, and that's another indication to me of why I cite the Roots Reggae Rastas as being on the forefront of this consciousness transformation globally because of the attendance at these festivals. These guys are setting up musical rituals, and literally white middle class people are flocking in droves to come check it out. So that PR campaign's working if you look at it from that angle.
Yeah, and you know, and I usually don't say stuff like this on the show, but excuse me, but you know, I have to say, anyone out there who has definitely interested in reggae music and the power behind it, it's an amazing thing. Throw you in some Bob Marley, sit down, close your eyes, relax, let the music just sink right in, and to the lyrics. Very, very powerful lyricist, you know, at that too. So. It's amazing. It really is, and I've done it many times. And I'm not talking drug-induced or whatever, you know, however you want to do it.
You don't have to have the drugs, right?
Exactly. You don't. I can't tell you how much I really enjoy just as throwing on some Bob Marley and just sitting back and relaxing. It is amazing. Well, Brent, I have to say it was a very, very interesting show. I appreciate you joining us tonight. And before you leave us, please give your website one more time, as well as where Song in Your Heart, the story of the search for the lost note, is available. Okay.
It's available at my website only right now, and that is www.bretlueder.com. That's BRETLUEDER. And then also filtering into the same page is the address www.esotericguide.com. That's ESOTERIC guide.com. And if you shoot me an email, the book is $29.99. If you're interested, just shoot me an email. Right now, I'm paying for shipping. So.
All right. Well, Brad, again, it was a pleasure having you on the show, and I'd love to have you back at some point and time because I know you do some other things as well besides this, the DVD series you have. If you want to mention that before we go, definitely let everybody know about that as well.
Okay, sure. I appreciate that, and it's been my pleasure to be here as well. Thank you. I do a DVD series where I interview speakers at the Bay Area UFO Expo. This will be my second year speaking, which has kind of complicated my time schedule during the weekend. But I've filmed volumes 1 and 2. I've got 11 interviews on volume 1 and 9 on volume 2. I got another 11, possibly 12 for volume 3 that I'm mixing right now. I'll be filming volume 4 this year. But basically, I'm just going a wide variety of speakers, collecting them together in one disc, which is a wide variety of subjects. One of my mentors, one of the people that's inspired me and I've learned a bunch from, is Jordan Maxwell. And what he likes to say is people need to do their homework and then connect the dots for themselves. You know, don't listen to me, do your own homework. So the philosophy behind my DVDs is put a bunch of the dots together in one area and then let people connect them themselves. So this will lead to documentaries, of course, but for right now, I'm basically just cataloging interviews on a wide variety of subjects. So if you missed the Bay Area UFO Expo, or if you missed events like that, you could buy my DVDs and get a really good cross-sampling of the type of information that you'd get if you attended one of these events. So, and again, I will be speaking this September 12th in Santa Clara, California, at the Bay Area UFO Expo. That website is www.thebayareaufoexpo.com.
All right, wonderful. Again, Brett, it was a pleasure having you on. And for those, you are more than welcome. And for those listening, we're going to close out a little differently here. We're going to play one more song for you as the show closes out, and that is going to be Bob Marley's "War." Great song. So get to it.
I got goosebumps when you said that.
I just have to remember which disc that is on. All right. Here we go again. This is Bob Marley's War. Again, Brett, thank you so much. And for everybody tuning in, I'll be back in a second after this just to close it out. All right, everybody. I want to say how much I appreciate everyone joining us tonight, those who hung out in the chat room, and, of course, those who are catching us on the archives, too. And, again, that was Bob Marley's War. Again, I don't do it much on the show, but, yeah, take the time to throw in some Bob Marley and sit back and close your eyes and just enjoy. It is some amazing music. But, again, thanks, everybody, for joining us, and Brett for taking the time to talk about his book, Song in Your Heart, the story of the search for the lost note. Check out his website, bretlueder.com. That's BRETLUEDER. So, all right, everybody, this has been Shadows in the Dark, where the darkness is illuminated. Good night, everyone.
Shadows in the dark.